When your friends are getting engaged or married, how does that really make you feel? People are getting married older and older. In the past, you would kind of see marriages happening at a younger age, but nowadays the median age for men and women are a little bit different, with men being older, but around 28, 29, early 30s, that people are just not settling down at the age that it used to happen. So now it's happening a lot later and later. So the question is just that, is there something wrong with that? What's up, fam? Welcome back to Big Picture Podcast, where we discuss faith, testimonies, and perspectives while focusing on the big picture. I am your host, Susan Obi. Thank you for listening and happy Wednesday. For today's episode, I'm just going to dive right into the questions that were brought up by actually mostly married people and people in relationships, questions that they would ask to singles. So I'm just going to read them off and then discuss some answers that I've heard from single people. So if you haven't watched part one of this episode, in the last episode, I just talked about general topics surrounding singleness. So things like loneliness or how to utilize singleness and some of the reasons that people may feel uncomfortable or maybe ashamed or embarrassed in singleness or talking about singleness, and then also the importance of self-esteem. So a lot of topics surrounding the topic of singleness. But for this episode, I'm going to be reading and answering questions that married people or people in relationships would ask to singles. So the very first question is, and I kind of read some of them in the last episode, but the first question is, why do you think that you have been single? So that is the question. Why do you think that you have been single? Essentially single for a prolonged amount of time. And some of the answers that I've noted they're actually quite a few. One, which I think maybe not a lot of people think about, is not everyone wants to be married. Not everyone wants to be married. So that is actually an answer that I've heard before, of just not really having that desire to be married ever. Or there's some that really don't have the desire to be married, maybe at that point, but definitely some that are like, I just don't see myself being married. So that's one of the answers that I think people may skip over, just because it is a natural desire to want relationships with people, but that doesn't necessarily mean to want a marriage relationship. So that's one answer. Another answer is that, which is probably the answer that people don't like to talk about, but just the fact that not everyone has had luck in finding a person that they feel that they are compatible with, or someone that they're willing to settle down with, or maybe even finding someone that is willing to settle down with them at that point in their life. So that is one of the reasons that I've heard of why people are single, or why someone can be single for such a long amount of time, is just not really having luck in the dating streets. Another answer that I've heard is just essentially waiting, which I kind of talked about this in the last episode, but just waiting until they feel like they're in a place where they actually want to take in a relationship or welcome that other person. I've heard people talk about financial goals. I want to have this amount of money in my bank account before I settle down, or I want to buy a house before I settle down with someone, or I want to finish school, or I want to do X, Y, and Z. So that is another really popular answer of just, I'm not in the place where I'm ready to take on someone else. And these are just a few of the answers and reasons that I've heard. Of course, there are so many other reasons, and I think it's just a really interesting and important topic to discuss. So maybe if you haven't talked about this with your friends who are single, maybe see if it's something that they want to talk about, or that you can just kind of bring up, because I think that there's a lot of nuances, a lot of reasons, and a lot of things that can go into this topic. So that's one question. The second question is, what do people enjoy about being single? And I have shared and heard some of these answers, but one thing is just the amount of time, not in the sense that, oh, if you're single, you're not busy, but in the sense of you are able to fill your time with the things that you want to fill your time with. So you're not going off of someone else's schedule, or you're not really considering another person, especially if you maybe live alone, maybe have some family that you're considering. But all in all, in general, you kind of have more freedom to fill your time with the things that you want to. So that is one of the reasons that I've heard that people enjoy being single. Another thing in a Christian context is just spending time with the Lord, you can just take a whole day, a whole Saturday. I've seen people do this, take a whole Saturday and say, I'm going to spend today with the Lord. I'm going to go to a park. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read scripture. I'm going to worship. I'm just really going to spend this day with the Holy Spirit inside of me, just having that conversation with Him, reading the Bible, studying the Bible. And you can really, that just goes back to having time to kind of do the things that you really want to do. So uninterrupted time with the Lord. And that is something that, from a Christian context, that some Christians can really, really, really feel like they're lacking, especially maybe if they're married or have so many kids, especially young kids. The reality is that it can be difficult, from what I've seen and heard, it can be difficult to really have that time where you feel uninterrupted. So I've heard people talk about, well, I pray in the shower, or I have to listen to the Bible while I'm driving because I just had no time to do it today. But it's just a different context and lifestyle than someone who is single. So one answer is just having that uninterrupted time with the Lord. Another answer too is just kind of that freedom to maybe date a little bit and know what you want and what you're looking for. And you kind of have that time to have more experience and just more advice from people. And you can really take your time in looking for a life partner if that is something that someone wants to do. It seems like there's a little bit less pressure. You just feel like, yeah, I've been single for a little bit, so I've had experience dating. I've been able to soak in wisdom and advice from other people who are already married. So that's another thing. I think there are so many reasons that people enjoy being single, and that is just a few that I've heard. And so the next question is a question that I asked or brought up in the last episode that I'll address. This question is, when your friends are getting engaged or married, how does that really make you feel? So again, these are questions that people who are in relationships or people who are married would ask single people. So when your friends are engaged, getting engaged or married, how does that make you feel? I've heard a ton of answers. I think some of the things or answers that are coming to mind when I'm thinking about some friends that I've talked with about this topic is just being joyful, being happy, and excited for their friends. And I think that this just goes back to a verse in scripture that says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, of just making sure that we're sharing one another's joy and happiness. If you're happy, I'm happy, especially if it's someone who's your friend and someone that you're close to. And that was also another topic that was brought up, of just making sure that you're being supportive, being happy, really encouraging, and just letting your friends know, like, yes, I'm really, really happy for you in this new season, and I wish you the best, and things like that. I think, though, the reality is, and the harsh truth is, that there are people who do not feel that way, especially if they are single and wanting to be in a relationship or married, and that is happening to their friends. There can be a sense of jealousy, a sense of discontentment. It can be very, very difficult. I've heard some people feel like they're just really just waiting for that next step, and it doesn't, it's hard sometimes to watch other people get what you want. And I think from a Christian context, I've definitely heard people say that, I'm just praying like, God, like, why is this not happening for me yet? I really want this. I've been praying about this. And I've heard people who are in relationships but not yet married also have that sense of discontentment of, yeah, I'm in a relationship, but I want to move forward. I want to move to the next step. I want to be engaged. I want to be married. I want to have a family. And I think I'm thinking back to myself personally in grad school or college, when I would hear people who are in relationships say that they just don't feel content, that they kind of want to move forward and kind of know, where is this going? What are we doing? I always thought that was interesting because in my mind, I thought that people just want to be in relationships, and well, the people I've heard, a lot of people that I've been surrounded by are like, I want to be in a relationship. That's pretty much the general consensus of, just at least in my experience, of my friends and people I've been surrounded by. So I thought it was interesting to hear a perspective of someone who is in a relationship still feel like, this is not quite what I want. I actually want to know where this is going and what we're doing, kind of thing. So I think, the grass is just always greener on the other side. So I think that is one of the feelings that people can have of just, I want this, and even though I have a relationship, I have this person that I really love and enjoy spending time with, there can still be that sense of jealousy of, why is this person getting what I'm not getting? I think it can also lead to lower self-esteem. Lowering standards is another thing that I've heard people say, that it just doesn't make them really feel like, or makes them have these thoughts of, is there something wrong with me? Is there something I need to work on? Is there something that I need to do differently? Why does this seem to be working for everyone else and not working for me? So those are some of the answers that I've heard in response to this question. How does it really make you feel? All right, next question is there something wrong with being single at a certain age? So this specific age range in this question is saying, is there something wrong with being single in your mid to late 20s, 30s, and 40s, only because society is kind of making it seem like really in your 20s, let's say 20s or 30s, early 30s, you should be settling down. So the question is asking, is there something wrong with not settling down at this point, or not even having any prospects or anything at this point? And in response to this question, I would say that this kind of goes back to what I talked about last time, of how society is kind of putting these standards to where it can seem like there's something wrong if you're not doing this at a certain age. This also goes back to something that a friend brought up when I was talking to her about it, of just how in general that the generations, let's just say from the 20th century and up until the 21st century now, of how people are getting married older and older. So in the past, you would kind of see marriages happening at a younger age. So I think the median from maybe the early 20th century was about 24 years of age. And then before that, I believe it would be even earlier than 24 years of age of people settling down. But nowadays, the median age for men and women are a little bit different, with men being older, but around 28, 29, early 30s, that people are just not settling down at the age that it used to happen. So now it's happening a lot later and later. So the question is just that, is there something wrong with that? I think that there is a lot of different reasons why that can happen. I think it's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just life, how things are progressing in the world and in society. I think in terms of something that I think is that there are a lot of relationships that are resembling or mirroring a marriage, but it's not actually a marriage, which can make people maybe feel like, I don't really have to get married. I just want to, if we know how we feel about each other, why do we have to actually get married? That's something that I've heard, something that I've seen over and over again, of just like, what is the big deal about marriage? And I think that's something I'll kind of have to look into a little bit more, because I'm not really sure. That's just one of the things I've heard of people say, of like, people are living together, they're joining their finances together and really getting the benefits of marriage, or essentially doing the same thing that they would do if they're married. So it's kind of like what is the reason to get married in the first place? And of course, the church would have a different perspective and things to say on that, of how there are certain boundaries and certain promises and blessings that come within the context of marriage. But just the way that the world is broken and imperfect, it's like people can feel like it doesn't matter. I can just do what I want and not necessarily lean into marriage in the way that God designed it to be. So I thought that was a great question, and probably something I'd have to look into a little bit more, of what is making people get married later. All right, another question. The older that you get, do you begin to lower your standards of what you're actually looking for? In other words, do you feel like, okay, it's been so-and-so amount of years and I haven't found this at all? Should I just settle? Maybe there's not someone out there like this. Maybe I need to lower my standards a little bit more. I think that definitely when I think about this, I've actually run into people who feel like they actually want to keep those standards, if not even raise them a little bit more, because as you're getting older, and from certain friends I can think about who are at a certain age and not married, there's more wisdom that they have seem to accumulate, and more advice that they've seemed to take in from people, and a certain lifestyle that they have and they want to continue. So I've actually seen people raise those standards or really keep them and say, actually, I'm actually better and I would rather be alone than to even settle down and kind of change my lifestyle or my views or my opinions on certain things just for the sake of being in a relationship. I think that after a while, people can get comfortable in their own skin, more and more comfortable, and that comes with age, from what I've seen or what I've heard my friends who are a little bit older say. So I think there's actually the opposite, the sense of actually keeping those standards and not lowering them. Of course, I'm sure there's a flip side. I just personally have more experience with people who are like, no, I'm actually keeping my standards here. I'm not going to bring them down just because I'm at this age and I'm still single. But I'm open to hearing what y'all think. If you have seen or know that people actually, or maybe you feel like, yeah, I do want to maybe lower my standards a little bit or tweak them a little because it's been a certain amount of time and I want to move forward with my life. So I think that is a good question. I think maybe people can also subconsciously lower their standards without knowing it or recognizing it. So again, it just depends on the person. All right, this last question is asking, how do I manage my heart well and my desires for being in a relationship while also maximizing the opportunities I have while being single? I think being truthful is really, really important. And there's something about vulnerability that I think is very freeing. I think something that I've experienced as I'm learning to be a little bit more open with my friends that I trust and my loved ones, that it's a very different feeling than keeping something inside. Because for me, it's like if this stays in my head or in my mind for so long, I have a certain perspective or view on this topic or on whatever I'm thinking or spending my time thinking about, and it can really get me down. But when I'm open and saying like, this is how I feel, I just want to share this, or this has been on my heart or mind lately, or this is what happened, this is what I've experienced, it's very freeing to just know that it's okay, that other people have experienced the same thing, or to just hear a different perspective that I couldn't have come to maybe on my own, just based on my experience. So I think that being truthful is really, really important in managing your heart while being single, while being on your own and learning more about yourself, of just being truthful about your feelings. I think it's also important to know who you're being truthful to. I think that takes discernment. I think that there are people who do really well with holding someone's heart or desires and thoughts and can really take that in well and steward those thoughts well and really share good advice or wisdom. And I know that I have friends like that where I just feel really, really comfortable opening up to them. I don't feel any sort of shame. So find those people and be honest with them of, yeah, this is how I am feeling. I think that is one thing I would say in response to this question. I think another thing to think about with maximizing opportunities while being single is just really knowing that there is a lot of freedom. Like, what are the things that you like to do? Are you doing those things? What are the things that you've always wanted to do? Maybe it's go back to school. Maybe it is learning a certain skill. Maybe it is starting a podcast, learning how to play an instrument. All of these things that may seem like, who cares? Like, it's not really that big of a deal. Like, you have time to do that, I think, or can at least make time to do that. So I think just really thinking outside the box as far as possible of something I always think about is how there are so many opportunities just in the world in general. There are so many rooms in this world that you can walk into, so many people to meet, so many things to try, so many skills to be learned. And as you learn more about yourself, you learn about your desires, your passions, and it's really so freeing and beautiful to pursue those things. But I think it can be maybe a little bit harder or more difficult to do that when you are considering another person or other people. So just really thinking about the blessing that you can have as being on your own and not really having to consider someone in a marriage or children or things like that, which of course that comes with its own blessing. So just really thinking about what is the blessing of being single. Of course there's blessings in marriage and relationship, but what are the blessings I have now in being single, and how can I actually maximize them? Because I may not always have these opportunities. So I think the way I'd answer that question is, 1, be truthful with yourself and be truthful with others. 2, really spend time thinking about how am I blessed because of this season that I'm in life, and how can I find my identity in not what other people think about me, but what I know about myself and what I know is true. So those were a few of the questions. There is one question that's asking, is singleness better? I am curious to hear what y'all's thoughts are on this. Is singleness better than marriage? The Bible does talk about this topic a little bit, of just saying how if you're single, you have the time to be free and devote that to the Lord. But when you're married, you have someone else to consider. It talks about this a little bit. So just wondering and curious, what do y'all think about that question? Okay, so thank you for listening. I think I would say the big picture on this is just knowing that every season of life can be beautiful. Every season can be beautiful, and we can make it into what we want it to be. And other people's thoughts or opinions don't have to control what we're actually experiencing. We can change our mindset. We are in control of our thoughts and the way that we see ourselves. So every season can be beautiful. So how can I make each season truly beautiful? How can I reorient my mind to see how blessed I am and how many opportunities that I actually have? I think it does take time to actually sit down and think, okay, what are the opportunities that I really have, and am I utilizing them? And knowing that there are, maybe you're looking at someone that is in a place that you want to be in. If you're single and you're like, I'm looking at these people, my friends, and I want to have that. I want to be engaged. I want to be married. But also knowing that there are people in that season that are maybe looking at you and saying, wow, I really love that this person is taking all these opportunities. I wish that I did that. That there's always people who want to be in your shoes, and there's probably going to be always someone that you maybe would like to be in their shoes as well. I think the grass is always greener. So just really considering that and knowing that every season can be beautiful. So thank you for listening, and I will see y'all in the next episode.